Hey, welcome back for another video. If you've been following along with any of my previous videos, you know that I've made reference to this split top Roubo bench that I've been building for a while. And I have been documenting every stage of the build along the way and filming it. So this is going to be one of the first videos that I talk about the bench and show you a little bit about it. As with any project, it usually begins by selecting the lumber that you want to use. So for a bench, historically, people might use hard maple for it. And the reason for that is because it's very stiff and heavy, and typically it's pretty easy to obtain, especially in North America. The downside is sometimes in some areas it can be fairly expensive. Ash is also a commonly used wood because it's also stiff and heavy, like what hard maple is, but currently it's undergoing quite an infestation of the emerald ash borer beetle, and it's just digesting all the ash across North America for the most part. So it's being harvested to save and utilize those timbers, and because there's quite a good supply of it presently, the price of it doesn't tend to be as expensive as hard maple. Soft maple is also a really good choice for a bench because it's widely available. And like hard maple, it's nice and smooth. It has a nice tight grain, so it's not open pore like what ash is. So when you're cleaning off your bench, you're not going to get sawdust and different things and particles stuck in the grain like you would with ash. But soft maple is also nice and heavy and stiff. And although it is a hard wood and a fairly hard wood, it's not as hard as what hard maple is or ash. So it's going to be a little bit easier on your machines when you're actually jointing and planing it, and it will be a little bit easier to chisel or do any joinery if you're using hand tools like a lot of people will when they build their bench. If you are looking to save some money when you build your bench, there's nothing wrong with choosing a soft wood like maybe pine or Douglas fir, but personally I just couldn't bring myself to have a bench made out of soft wood like that, because I figure I'm going to be using this bench for the next 20 or 30 years, so it's going to need to be able to take a beating in the long run. After I gave consideration to some of the things that I've just talked about, I chose to go with soft maple for my split top Roubo bench. Some of the accent pieces are going to be walnut, but for the bulk of it, probably 90% or more of it, soft maple. I decided to use the bench crafted vices on my Roubo bench because I just simply love the look of these things, and they seem to work so well with everybody else on YouTube that has them on their split top Roubo benches. When you open and close the jaws on your chop, just a quick flick of the wrist, and that's all it takes to hold your workpieces securely so they don't move around. The crubber that they use on these jaws really squishes against your workpiece. It doesn't mar it, and it just holds things so securely that it's just going to make woodworking so much easier with hand tools that I've gotten into over the last few years. I ended up purchasing the Bench Builders kit from Bench Crafted, so it came with all the knockdown hardware for the base. So if I ever want to take it apart, it'll be very easy just to disassemble it and move it to some other location. It also comes with a set of plans that have all the measurements on it that you're going to be able to need to build the bench, and they look like this right up here on the wall. Well, if you've made it this far in the video, you must like this kind of content, so please give me a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please do so. I really want to get over 1,000 subscribers by Christmas, and it's all of you out there that can help me do that. In case you were wondering how much lumber you need to buy, the plans call for about 150 board feet of 8/4 stock. They recommend that you actually buy 200 board feet so that you have enough for waste, and if you need to build any extra jigs or fixtures or for other projects, you'll have a little bit of leftover stock. But definitely get the 8/4 stock. It makes laminating the tops so much faster and easier than if you're trying to laminate 4/4 stock. Although they recommend getting the 200 board feet, I ended up with 250 board feet because the sawmill that I purchased my lumber through actually gives a pretty hefty discount when you order 250 board feet or more. And that extra 50 board feet cost probably about another $70 altogether, so my cost per board foot came down quite a bit. So if you have that option, or maybe if you want to talk to your mill in your local area about getting some kind of a volume discount, they just might do that for you too. Once you have your lumber, you're going to want to let it acclimate to your shop for a little while before you start milling anything. I typically tell people to let it acclimate for at least 1 to 2 weeks. typically I wait about a month. I'm not somebody that goes through projects very fast, so I usually wait about 1 month. In that time, you don't have to be doing nothing. You can be working on other projects, but what I would recommend that you do is you pick through that stack of lumber and you try and find the absolute straightest boards with the straightest grain and set them aside. Have enough of those set aside that you can use those ones or save them for the tops. You want to do that because someday after your bench is all complete and you're going to want to refurbish that top using a hand plane, you want to make sure you have the straightest grain, so when you're going across that with a hand plane to flatten or smooth it or just refurbish it, that you're not going to get any grain tear out. I'll talk a little bit more about some specifics of that once I actually get to the video dealing with the tops, but for now, just set those boards aside and you'll be glad you did in the long run. Although this is going to be a workbench and it's not a fine piece of furniture, you're still going to want to make sure that you end up with a project or a bench that is straight and square. And one of the easiest things you can do to ensure that is only mill your lumber part way. Don't mill things to the final thickness or lengths right on day number 1. So when you start your milling process after you've let it acclimate, you're going to rough mill the boards to approximately 1/8 of an inch over thickness and probably about 1/4 of an inch too wide. When cutting them to length though, make sure to allow yourself some extra length to account for planer snipe, probably about 4 inches at each end. The easiest way to do that if you have the machines is with a bandsaw and a circular saw. Very easy to rip the rough boards to width on the bandsaw, and also very easy to just cut them to rough lengths using the circular saw. After you've rough milled everything, you're going to want to let it acclimate one more time for a few days or a week before you bring everything to the final thicknesses and widths. I will leave you with a word of caution though. Any pieces like the top or the legs where you're laminating pieces together, you're probably going to want to let them actually go to the final milling session at some later point, because you're going to need to actually glue them together, and when you do that, the pieces are going to slide and they're going to misalign. So if you've made your 4-inch top pieces exactly 4 inches and then you go laminating them, you're going to have pieces that are uneven, and when you joint them or hand plane them or mill them down again, you're not going to end up with the full 4-inch thick top. And that's going to pose a problem for the tail vise when you install it, because it just simply won't be thick enough. But you can definitely mill to your final dimensions in that second session for things like the stretchers and the rails of the base. By taking extra care in the milling of your lumber, you'll be rewarded with nice straight stock that's easy to work with when you start doing all the joinery operations on the bench. Now I realize this video isn't really all that interesting because it's just me flapping my gums a whole lot, but I like to think that I'm giving you some tips if you're just starting your bench that are going to be useful, that are going to get you off on the right track to begin with. Because I know when I started my bench, I had a lot of questions about how to go about it, and hopefully this video answered some of those questions for you too. And until the next video, go build something beautiful.